Denizens of the night, welcome to another episode of the macabre, the terrifying. Broadcasting live from a lean-to covered in snow, I will be your guide through the witching hours. Tonight, I have a very special treat for you. I've got a killer mashup that is guaranteed to tingle your spine. I'm joined today by fellow horror narrator Dark Knight Tales, who will be reading an ominous and icy tale from A.G. Hilton. Picture, if you will, a harried man trudging through the alabaster purgatory of deep winter in the woods. The tragedy of his past always 2 steps behind him, and his quarry always 2 steps ahead. The man needs to fulfill his vengeance, but how far will he go in its pursuit? And what, ultimately, is the cost? This story is called The Beast, and was written by A.G. Hilton.
The huntsman rose from his makeshift shelter, sloughing off the remnant of another fitful night's sleep. His breath blew in plumes from lungs that ached, through a throat and mouth that were raw and tasted of copper. A hard frost lay on the ground about him, and the cold morning air made his limbs stiff and heavy. Yet as the first light of dawn cracked through the skeletal tree limbs, he knew it was already past time to get moving. The beast was afoot. He had tracked the creature for some time now. Perhaps it had been weeks, perhaps months. It had grown difficult to remember. He only knew he must keep pressing forward. The beast was closer than ever. This he sensed with utmost certainty. He had been too late to save the last few settlements, but not by much. The beast had remained 1 step ahead, leaving in its wake corpses that were still warm as if to mock him. Thus far, the thing had cut a steady path forward. Here and there a trail deviated to swallow up one more homestead, but always it pushed forward toward the mountains. The huntsman sensed something critical in that trajectory. Something lay in those dark hills, some ending. The beast's den, perhaps? A trap? Whatever the case, the huntsman remained undaunted. He would follow it into the hills if he must. As long as he and his quarry drew breath, he would hunt. Having loaded his sack, he struck off, the repeating rifle at the ready in his hand. Heavy boots crushed down the frozen grass and fallen pine needles. With his fur jacket and cap, he looked very much the predator on the prowl as he sought the beast's spoor. The trail was not always obvious. Sometimes a whole day would go by without sign of his target's passing. Despite this, the huntsman never worried. He always picked up the signs sooner or later. Their destinies were intertwined, he and the beast. Of this he was also sure. He made it so in his mind. Eventually they must come face to face, and only one would survive. As the sun rose higher on the horizon, the huntsman caught sight of deeply scored marks on a tree's bark where, perhaps, the thing had sharpened its claws. These signs he followed deeper into the trees on his northward path. The smell of smoke drifted to the huntsman, a surprise in such a remote wilderness, and he followed it with a growling stomach. Suddenly, the thickness of the forest broke away to a clearing in which sat a small cottage. Unlike those frontier homesteads encountered before, this one had somehow been overlooked by the prowling monster. Smoke curled from the small chimney and the whinnying of a horse drifted from the cramped stable nearby. As the huntsman watched, a figure emerged from the front of the cottage and froze on the ramshackle porch. Silence fell. The 2 stared on, breath pluming, neither moving. At last, the huntsman raised a hand in greeting, and the figure responded in kind. On the frontier, one could never be certain of these lone homesteaders, and the huntsman found himself more wary of anyone still living that remained in his path, always fearful of the beast's trickery. But as the huntsman approached the cottage dweller, he saw in the man's solemn gaze an honesty that disarmed him. The man was brawny and his face weathered, age uncertain. The huntsman thought his dark hair and ruddy complexion bespoke native blood. "You're lost?" the hermit asked. "I'm tracking." "You're off the trails. None come this way except traders now and again, and I haven't heard word from the people to the south for nigh on a fortnight." "That's because they're dead." The hermit paused to consider this. "And you?" "I tracked the beast." Silence then. The hermit studied him. The huntsman shifted, uncomfortable under his searching gaze. The man turned away. "There's no beast here. You best be on your way." "Wait. I've traveled far. If you would let me step out of the cold for an evening, I can trade with you." The huntsman turned to a pile of wood against the side of the cottage. "I'll even split wood for the fire." The man nodded after a moment. "You may stay if you chop the firewood, but put your weapon down inside." With some reluctance, the huntsman complied. He then went to the wood pile with the axe the hermit provided. Over and over he hewed the wood into smaller pieces, with each swing thinking only of the beast. "You've traveled a long way after one animal." The huntsman and the hermit sat facing each other on a pelt inside the little cottage as the daylight failed outside. The fire threw flickering shadows about them while steam from their bowls of stew rose to obscure their faces. "It's not an animal," the huntsman said. "I seek a monster, a man-eater." The hermit's eyebrows rose. "Maybe you know of it? Wendigo, I've heard it called in some places. I've tracked it north for some time, always toward yonder mountains." The hermit's brow furrowed. "You seek that which can't be killed?" "No, I'll kill it." "Wendigo is spirit, comes over a man, makes him monstrous, bloody, violent. One cannot kill spirit." The huntsman felt his grip on the bowl tighten. "No, it's a beast. I've seen it in the flesh. Flesh can die." The hermit seemed to consider this as he stirred his stew. "You've seen it?" The huntsman strained to bring the memory to mind. It plagued him nightly in his dreams, yet still it was hazy. Perhaps that was a blessing. He could remember seeing its dark shape through the window on that fateful night. He tried to focus only on the image of the window, not the wet carnage that had lain at his feet. The thing had been but a silhouette. Trying to remember too vividly made his head spin. But he recalled the suggestion of bone white, raking claws, perhaps of antlers branching from the head. This much he told to the hermit. "This sounds more of white man's tales than Wendigo's." The huntsman set his teeth. "I know what I saw." The other man sat quiet for a time, gazing into the fire. "And you were left alive. You should leave this alone. Go back to your home. Do not continue towards those mountains." "I must. Don't you understand? It must be killed. Butchered just like it butchered those in the valley. And I'll do it or else be butchered myself." "You're bloody-minded." "As would you be, had you seen what I've seen." A tremor crept into the huntsman's hand as he set his bowl aside. "I've seen gore-soaked battlefields back east in the war. I've killed men with my own hands, but none of those bodies were ever so savaged as what this thing leaves. To see that, to see it, in your home." "Your family?" The huntsman stifled the sob that wanted to rise in his throat. "Yes. My son, my wife, the little one in her womb." The hermit rose and studied the huntsman anew. He looked troubled. "I understand your pain, but you must not go on. If it is a Wendigo that sets your path, nothing good can await you at its end. The best thing you can do is run the other direction." "I have to follow. The huntsman met the hermit's eye. "I'm determined. A man goes its own way." And with that, the hermit began settling in for the night. The huntsman watched his host as he arranged the blankets he had been provided. He could not trust this man or his advice, no matter how he felt at first. Anyone who would dissuade him from hunting the monster that killed his family could not be trusted. He sensed trickery here. Wondering dark things, the huntsman kept a watchful eye on his host, endeavoring to keep sleep at bay and his rifle within easy reach until the sun once more chased away the shadows. Despite his best efforts to remain vigilant, the hermit's soup warmed his belly and the huntsman dozed. As sleep rose to meet him, it brought with it the dreams which crouched ever ready to overtake him, dreams of the beast. He saw it, a shadow under the moon as it squatted amid the trees feasting on some fresh kill. Gore streaked the snow, hung in low branches. The huntsman smelled the blood as if it were before him, tasted it as if it were in his mouth. He wanted to vomit. Finally, having eaten its fill, the beast howled into the night, a warbling, tuneless whistle of a sound the huntsman imagined he sometimes heard in the distance. When he awoke, head pounding and body stiff, the sun had long since risen and climbed its way toward noon. The cottage was empty, and the horse gone. The hermit apparently left out early for his day's business. The huntsman stoked the low-burning embers in the fireplace and watched for the hermit's return. But as the sun moved closer toward midday, he knew he had to keep pressing on, lest the trail run cold. It was hard travel through the forest beyond the hermit's cottage. The huntsman forged across thickly wooded land, wherein he doubted any settler or trapper had yet walked. He found shelter as he was able, but the days grew colder the closer he ventured to the mountains. Despite his thick jackets and pelts, he began to worry over his journey. Days passed without seeing another human being, and scarcely seeing any animals. The signs of the trail grew sparser than ever. A gnawing hunger such as he'd never known settled deep in his stomach. Now and then he was able to shoot small game and drink the melted frost and snow, but his hunger was not abated, nor was the rawness of his throat soothed. The nightmares continued to plague him, and at length he began to lose hope. It seemed he had lost the trail altogether. Perhaps this was the beast's last trick, to leave him wandering until his strength gave out, only to be hunted down as it had been hunted. But rather than let it defeat him, the huntsman let the thought burn in his mind, heating his body and suppressing the terrible hunger and thirst. He'd not let it win so easily. When he had the beast's blood, then all these things would be satisfied. It was a blessing when he came upon a trail and a miracle when he found the wagon. At first, the wagoneers almost shot him for a bandit, but when he flashed some of his remaining gold pieces, they eyed his gun and haggard face with suspicion, but asked no questions and allowed him aboard. Gold in hand, the good folks told him they were part of a supply chain headed toward a mining settlement at the foot of the dark mountains. Just before dusk, they arrived. The settlement was in its infancy, little more now than an outpost for a new mining operation. Beyond a rickety saloon, general store, and a hastily constructed stable, there were no buildings. An encampment of lean-tos and tents squatted around the few structures, and the skeletal frames of other buildings were being raised on even as he looked. Miners and laborers milled about the muddy avenue as the huntsman drifted towards the soft glow in the saloon windows. Once inside, he paused to take in the scene. Men drank at the bar and played cards at the tables. Prostitutes shipped in by the mining company made their rounds, and on the floor above he saw a steady rotation of foot traffic through the private rooms. He drew stairs as he stood in the doorway, rifle slung over his shoulder. The stairs made him nervous, but for a moment he could not move as the buzz of life in the room washed over him. He'd not been so close to this many beating hearts in many a long day. It made his head spin. He was surprised the beast had not passed this way as of yet, and for a moment grew hopeful that he had perhaps beaten it to the mountains and might cut it off. No doubt it would come, drawn to all the blood and warmth of this place, and when it did, he would be waiting. He brought some food and drank the cheap spirits available. After his long days on the hunt, the liquor went straight to his head, and thoughts of the beast, his family, and the carnage of the trail felt pleasantly like a distant dream. When one of the women approached him, he readily pressed his remaining gold into her hand and stumbled after her up the stairs. After a hot bath and a quick, fumbling rutting, the weariness of his long-traveled road seized him. Vaguely, he heard the woman telling him his time was up and to get going, but in moments he was asleep and in the claws of a nightmare. He could do little but watch as the thing played out. He had no will left to him. He was with the beast on that fateful night past, and he could not look away or escape the creature's primal thoughts. The beast held the screaming one down. It had already torn the throat from the other that had tried to attack it, and it heard the last choking gasps in the other room. But the screaming one, that interested it greatly. Drawn as it was to the heat of live meat and rhythmic pounding of pulsing blood in veins, the beast had found a treasure in this one, for it sensed 2 heartbeats and hungered all the more. It tore into its prey, ripping and tearing until the hands which beat at it weakened and fell away. It bathed in the warmth of the blood, drank it down to soothe the cold rawness of its throat. Piece by piece it tore the meat apart and swallowed each bit to its chasm of a stomach in a desperate attempt to quell the unceasing hunger. When the last 2 corpses had no more to give, it leaned back and moaned its tuneless howl. Rising from its feast, movement caught its eye. Something through the dwelling's window. It launched for its prey, but as it threw itself through the glass, it found only darkness outside as its reflection splintered. The huntsman staggered to his feet. He lay on the floor of the saloon's private room in which he'd passed out. Light slipped in from around the curtain, and he realized he'd slept most of the day away. His head felt as if a railroad spike had been driven through it. His mouth was cotton dry, and his throat wretchedly raw. The day prior was hazy, and the drinks had been too much. At once he remembered his gold-bought companion for the evening, and shame joined in on his hungover condition. He sat on the edge of the bed, the night's visions teased at the edges of his mind, seeming somehow closer to remembrance than usual. But he could not recall them in full, and did not try. No sense in dwelling what can't be fixed. By some miracle, his clothes and the rifle lay untouched in the corner where he'd left them. He thought he would have been robbed, passed out as he'd been, but it seemed no one had disturbed him. He was surprised no one had come to throw him out in the night. Then he noticed the silence. As he slipped into his clothes, he listened intently for a footfall or a murmur of voices. Surely someone would be about at this hour. There ought to be the sounds of hammering and construction from the half-built buildings as there had been the evening prior. But the only sound that came was the occasional moan of the wind. Blood ran cold in his veins. He reached for the doorknob, praying against what he expected to find, but knowing what lay in wait just as it had all those times before. The smell hit him before the door was opened. They lay all about on the floor below, some bloodied and torn, but intact, some in pieces. The bar shined slick with blood, the glasses filled with liquor that was not liquor. A ropey trail of intestines swung from one of the chandeliers. The huntsman felt his gorge rising as he picked his way across the bodies and into the open air. Outside, pale light struggled through the wintry clouds to illuminate a ghost town. More bodies lay about the street, blood mixing with the mud. He heard not a hoof stamp or whinny of a horse. The coverings on the wagons lay in tatters. The huntsman did not search through the remains of the surrounding encampment. He already knew what lay there. The beast had confounded him again, and again left him to be mocked. Amid the partially devoured bodies, a numbness crept into him. It seemed he could, perhaps should, lay down in the muck with those bodies and give up. But he wouldn't let his resolve be broken. He picked through the grisly detritus, gathering what food he could carry and taking warmer jackets not so stained by the slaughter. He struck out, blood from the town still staining his fingers, toward the mountains. The pounding of his head subsided somewhat. and his throat felt better, though the coppery taste lingered in his mouth. In another small blessing, he realized for the first time in a long time he didn't feel so hungry as he plodded into the hills, gun slung over one shoulder, whistling low and tunelessly as he went.
I knew it! When did you figure it out? I had my suspicions at the hermit's cottage. The huntsman is so blinded by his goal that he can't stop and see the reality around him. I guess that's what happens when you take single-mindedness to its extreme. Let that be a lesson to us all. Be stubborn and persistent, but not so much so that it starts costing other people their lives. Let's take a moment to thank the two people who made tonight's story happen. It was written by A.G. Hilton, who wrote a number of other stories on the channel, and who has a collection of short stories you can read right now that is linked in the description. It's narrated by none other than your very own Midnight Host. So chances are, if you liked The Pit or Uncle Asher, you'll like those as well. Speaking of narration, tonight's narrator was Dark Knight Tales, who has his own YouTube channel chock full of fantastic tales that he narrates, and some of which he wrote as well. I asked him to tell us a story tonight, because I think if you enjoy the normal fare we have around here, you'll definitely enjoy what he's doing as well. I'll put a card on your screen at the end of this video that will take you to a story he picked out just for the occasion. But before you head off to listen to some park ranger stories, won't you leave a like on this video and show our writer and our narrator some love in the comments? Whatever you do, make some time for some self-evaluation and introspection, won't you? And don't fall asleep.